Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Juta Padakamalam Sri Gurum Vaishnavansam Sri Rupam Sakrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tvam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sagana Lalita Sri Vishakanitam Sham Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sivasadi Gaur Bhakta Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sivasadi Gaur Bhakta Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna.
Hare Krishna devotees, Dandat Pranam. So welcome to Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. As every Wednesday, today we are going to hear wonderful qualities of Srila Prabhupada by his disciples. I'll play the video now. Hare Krishna, Dandat Pranam. Please use chat box to respond if you're not able to hear properly.
Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Hite Namani.
He said, I have so many palaces all over the world that I can stay in. He said, practically speaking, there's no difference between me and the Goswamis in terms of our lifestyle. He said, they stayed under a different tree every night. I stay in a different palace every night. They wrote, I write. He said, originally I did not want to come here. He said, Krishna, not to America, but to this world. He said, Krishna asked, I want you to write those books. Come down and write those books. And I said, I don't want to come to that. I don't want to go to that material world. And he said, Krishna said, don't you worry, I'll take care of everything. You write those books. That was the first and only time that I've ever heard or read, I might be wrong, where Prabhupada actually spoke about Krishna speaking to him and how he didn't want to go. And he made that face, his upper lip kind of, I did not want to go to that world. He said, I will take care of everything. You just come down and write those books. The atmosphere when he said that, it was just, it was like nothing I've ever experienced, ever.
We were in Prabhupada's room once, in the early 70s. I was sannyasi, so maybe 73, 74. And it was a beautiful afternoon. The sun was setting and golden rays were shining on Prabhupada. It was very sublime. A nice breeze was blowing. It was a very beautiful atmosphere. And Prabhupada took us back to old India, the turn of the century, and when he was a child, when he was a young householder. And he took us there, actually, and he began to talk about how people used to work and relationships between householders and their servants, and how people used to cook and things. So there we were, back in India with Prabhupada. And then he took us back farther to his early childhood, when he was playing with, not playing, but having the Rath Yatra and worshipping Radha Govinda. And then only Karandar and I were in the room. And Prabhupada looked at us very strongly and said, whatever I'm doing now, I was doing then. Do you understand? And of course we were at that point kind of speechless. And then Prabhupada said, never was there a time when I did not know Krishna. Do you understand? And he said it in such a way that it was clearly the case. So that was a very powerful experience.
At this time in Delhi, because there was one Pandit who was Prabhupada's first disciple, Acharya Prabhakar Mishra, and he was a Sanskrit scholar, not only a Sanskrit scholar, but also he was very cultured. He had MA, PhD, everything, and he had been actually teaching Sanskrit. And Prabhupada went to Jhansi, and he actually told Acharya Prabhakar, he said, I came here because in a dream I saw you and I knew I was supposed to come. So then I came to Jhansi, and then that's when Prabhupada says, I met you for this reason. And so then he was there. He was a very cultured man. I was impressed by his demeanor. He was very well clean-cut and very well behaved and very articulate because he was a scholar. And Prabhupada, when he was there with him, they would do bhajan together. They'd actually go out and do Rath Yatra, small Rath Yatra. They'd go do programs in other cities and everything around the area, small villages. And Acharya Prabhakar said that one night he had to go to Delhi. It was actually Krishna Janmashtami. He had to go to Delhi. He came back, took a little rest. Then he woke up. It was 1 a.m. And this was 1954, Janmashtami. And he said that he could hear Prabhupada playing Mridanga in the temple room. And it was very ecstatic. So he went upstairs. And when he saw Prabhupada there, Prabhupada was bouncing around the temple room doing kirtan. And he was wearing this long garland all the way down to his feet. And Prabhupada was just in total bliss chanting. So Acharya Prabhakar was watching this, and he thought it was very strange because these were Kadamba flowers, and Kadamba flowers aren't real common in Jhansi. They're very rare. in that area. And but the other interesting things is Kadamba flowers are usually about this big, about the size of a golf ball. And the ones that were on Prabhupada's garland were the size of tennis balls. And this was pretty bizarre because it was very big. And the other thing was the aroma that was in the air. He called it upakrit, non-material atmosphere, because he was a Sanskritist. And he wanted to ask Srila Prabhupada, well, what was this? Where did this come from? This just doesn't, you can't buy it in the market, this garland. And the atmosphere was so surcharged. He said it smelled like heavenly planets, the aroma. So Prabhupada wouldn't answer. He just kept doing kirtan, bouncing around the temple room, chanting. Then the next morning, he asked Srila Prabhupada, what went on? What was this? Where did you get the garland from? Why did it smell so much? And why were you feeling so blissful? And Srila Prabhupada told him that I was feeling some love for Krishna, and I was chanting to him, and he appeared and gave me this garland, and I went to touch his feet or grab his feet, and then he disappeared. And that was it. And he said, because of that, I was dancing around the temple room, and he was crying. Prabhupada was crying and everything. And Acharya Prabhakar also said that sometimes Srila Prabhupada would chant kirtan for 3 days straight without eating and sleeping. He would just be doing kirtan on and on and on. And the other thing is the result of his bhajan, and the result of the bhajan was that Krishna had appeared. And so I was taking it to heart that what Acharya Prabhakar was saying had some validity to it, because just the nature of Acharya Prabhakar, and he was very believable. And that basically was it with Acharya Prabhakar. There's a lot more. You can read it in Leela Marita, but there's more detail also. But that was very enlivening to hear.
Oh, another time in Los Angeles, the first time they played the Govinda prayers. First time in the history of ISKCON, I was there. And as Prabhupada entered the temple room, Vishnu John turned on the Govinda tape. And I used to always try and be behind Prabhupada's lotus feet so I could try and put my head at his lotus feet as he was offering his obeisances to each deity, to Gauri Tai, to Radha Rukmini, to Radha Krishna, and to Lord Jagannath. And then he'd go sit at the Vyasasan. So that day, I'll just never forget, because when he sat on the Vyasasan, he was feeling such ecstasy. And tears were like shooting from his eyes. And those of us who were sitting near at the bottom of the Vyasa, we were getting showered by Prabhupada's tears.
Literally.
Literally showered. You could feel his tears, shooting.
So during the 1976 festival in Vrindavan, there was, I believe it was Ram Navami, and there was a whole schedule that was started at Mangalarti and went all the way to midnight. Prabhupada was given a lecture that evening at Krishna's birthplace in Mathura. And there was a pandal set up, and 20,000 people came. So it was really very, very impressive. So, there was Mangalarti, and after Mangalarti, I got to go on a morning walk with Srila Prabhupada. And when he got back, we had a whole program there. He gave class, etc. Then they had all these dignitaries come from New Delhi. It was like the governor, big, what would be equivalent to like a senator, state representatives, meeting Prabhupada all day. And I was just hanging outside his room. Wasn't allowed to go in the room, but I was just kind of peeking in. And Prabhupada was just preaching like amazing all day long. And people were laughing, and you could just see the faces of all these dignitaries. Prabhupada was he was like a lion amongst lambs. He was just preaching so vigorously. I was amazed. then, that went on for the entire day. And then, of course, there was a festival, and then we went to, at night, we went to Mathura. And Prabhupada gave this lecture, which, as I said, about 20,000 people showed up. So Prabhupada started the lecture by saying, so because there are so many people here to hear Krishna's pastimes, and they may not speak English, I'm going to speak in Hindi, and I apologize. Prabhupada actually says, I apologize to my English-speaking disciples. Like he had to apologize to us. But while I was sitting there, I was looking around, there's like 20,000 people. He's preaching about Krishna and Lord Chaitanya. And I'm looking at the devotees. There's devotees from Africa, there's devotees from Europe, there's devotees from England and Australia and South America. And I'm thinking about Bhaktivinoda Thakur, how he said, when will the Americans and Englishmen and Germans come and with their hands raised high say, Jai Sachinandana Gora Hari, right? When will that day come? And I was like, wow, the day has come. And there's all these devotees there. And I was thinking, Prabhupada, you did it. I was thinking, you did this. You have done this. And now you're preaching to 20,000 people, and you were preaching to all these dignitaries all day long. You've done it. You don't have to do anything else. You've done it. You can just, kind of rest on your laurels. You don't need to push. You've done it. You've done it all. And of course, with Prabhupada's accomplishment, there was fanfare. People really, he did an amazing thing, miraculous thing. So, one might think, oh, well, you're getting certain kind of distinction, and, people are appreciating that you're speaking to 20,000 people like this. But Prabhupada wasn't like that. He wasn't interested in that. He was just interested in glorifying Krishna. So what happened is the talk went on for quite a long time, into the night. And by the time we got back to Fogal Ashram, we were staying at Fogal Ashram, it was like midnight. And everyone was completely exhausted. I mean, the day was just like, I'm done, I'm like the, zombies, the Walking Dead. And, but unfortunately, I had gotten a little sick because I ate some jalebis in the marketplace, right? What is that place called down in Vrindavan? Whatever. Loi Bazaar. So, I got sick and, diarrhea. So, I went to take rest and ran to, did my stuff. And came back, lay down, 5 minutes later, get up, go back, lay down. Every time I laid down and relaxed, I had to go back. It was just really hellish. And this was like going on for about a half hour. And I said, you know what? I'm not going to be able to sleep. I might as well just stay up and go chant my japa. And I'll go down to the temple. And it was like 2 o'clock in the morning. So everyone was dead. Dead tired, exhausted from all the festivities. I was the only person. I walked down there. I was the only person walking from Fogal Ashram. It was almost a little scary, actually. But also really sweet, too. Very quiet, very sublime in Vrindavan. So I came out the front of Krishna Balaram's temple, and I started to circumambulate. And as I came around the back of the temple, I was right next to Srila Prabhupada's room. And there was a light on. Now, Prabhupada has been preaching, tirelessly since 4 o'clock in the morning. It's 2 o'clock the next day. And in his room, he has his dictaphone. And he's going, Srila Vishwanatha Chakravarti Thakur says in his explanation of the Gita. And Prabhupada's translating the Bhagavatam. And I'm like, why? You've already done it all. You've done everything. You've done this big festival. There's no one around to see you doing this, but he was there translating the Bhagavatam. And he was doing it for us. That was the only, logical, he should be exhausted himself. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. He got back at midnight. And he's translating the Bhagavatam. And I got to I chanted my japa, and it was just me and Prabhupada. He didn't know I don't know if he knew. He knows whatever Krishna wants him to know. And I just got to watch him translate the Bhagavatam for about 20 minutes. And then his servant came out and kicked me out. I'm like, I'm not doing anything. But the amazing thing was Srila Prabhupada's tireless pursuit of giving Krishna consciousness to this planet, to this world, to this universe. And that's why he's the spiritual master of the universe.
I was having the service of being in Vrindavan, and I was in charge of the kitchen. And Ayodhyapati, who is Govinda Bringa Maharaj, he was the cook. So Prabhupada left, so everybody went to his room, because I was doing service, but I had no time to go to Prabhupada's room, because I'm too busy with my service. Somebody has to finish the cooking, prasadam has to be taken care of, devotees are coming. So this is more important than sitting with Prabhupada in his room, Prabhupada wants. But the last 3 hours I was next to Prabhupada, sitting. His head was there, and I was sitting here, and I was feeling a little uncomfortable even to touch Prabhupada and do the last massage. At that time he was easily available to everybody. But I was very shy. I thought, wow, I'm so fallen, how can I touch Prabhupada and give him massage? Let me just do kirtan with the rest of the devotees. And I was very carefully observing his lips. And Prabhupada opened 2 times the mouth. Hare Krishna, that was it. There was only 2 times. But I could see very clearly it was Hare Krishna, and that was it. Prabhupada left just by saying Hare Krishna.
And in the lecture that he gave, I don't remember most of the lecture, but the one line he spoke, which was really interesting, he said, "This is a movement for the living entity." And I was thinking how, generally we talk about saving the human beings, but he was, describing the movement as a movement for all living entities. So that really struck me.
Somehow or other, and I'm never quite sure how it happened, he and I ended up alone in the room. And it was Srila Prabhupada's room. He always had a coffee table, which he used as a desk, because he liked to sit on the floor. And he had an armoire next to it, a steel cabinet, such as he used to have in India. And in it he used to keep his correspondence and books and things like that. And Srila Prabhupada was behind the desk, and he was showing me, incidentally to doing something else, how he would open up an envelope with a letter opener and then use the envelope for his reply, and then to save paper and for his first draft. And then he'd draft it out again onto the letter when he had it down the way he wanted it. And somehow he had asked me to do something, and in the end, I ended up behind his desk, and he ended up on the other side. I was so on my toes and alarmed by the experience of being alone with Prabhupada. It was just like being with Queen Elizabeth or Indra or something of that sort, all alone. And you say, oh my God, what am I going to do now? I have no instruction. I don't even know what to say, because I wasn't just initiated. And I had, been a part of the Hridayashri. I was still sort of psychedelicizing a little bit. And Srila Prabhupada was standing there, and I'm sitting there totally mortified, wringing my hands and squirming my toes and wondering what to do next, and not wanting to leave by any means, but not knowing what to do if I stayed. And Srila Prabhupada looked at me and said, we should always be considering what is my duty? He said. And I'm thinking, duty, okay. And I was been hearing impaired since I was young, and I didn't know that. And it's only the last few years I got hearing aids. So I didn't have any hearing aids. So what to speak of Prabhupada's accent and my inability to hear, I was having a hard time understanding, plus the psychedelics residually floating around in my brain cells. So Prabhupada points at this coffee table and says, do you see this ant? And I've been looking very carefully, and I know Srila Prabhupada is the external representative of Super Soul, that when Prabhupada says there's an ant, there's an ant. And I looked at the table, and there was no ant there. And I said, do you see that ant? And I didn't know what he meant. I said, there's no ant. And I said, sort of like yes and no combined. Because I didn't want to say no and appear stupid to not see the spiritual or whatever ant was there. And I didn't want to say yes and be proven a liar because I couldn't see the ant and I didn't know where it would be found. So then Srila Prabhupada looked at me intensely as though that the ant issue now being solved, he wanted to get on to real business, and he said, my duty, he said, is to, my job, he said, is to understand what is my duty to this ant. I said, oh no. I said, not only there's an ant that I can't see, but now I have a duty to it. I said, what am I going to do? He said, somehow, Prabhupada looked at me beseechingly almost, somehow I have to help this ant. He said, and maybe I can chant, and he said, reaches down, he says, maybe I can chant Hare Krishna. Or he went like this, feed it a little prasadam. He said, if we can help one ant become Krishna conscious, then our whole movement is a glorious success. And then I realized it was a pure metaphor. That Prabhupada was aware of my bewilderment is pretty obvious. That he used it to make a point was excellent. And there I was, instructed by the invisible ant to whom I had a duty to feed and to chant, and that if I did so, it was our movement, whole movement was a success.
My parents came to see me at the manor, and Prabhupada was in London, and I'd come back from London to the manor to meet with my parents. I hadn't seen them for about 5 years, and they had never seen me as a devotee. So during the course of the afternoon, I went to look for some prasadam for them, and there was none. I was told, well, we have an early Sunday feast here, and there's nothing left. So I was unable to give them any. Anyway, I took them around the manor, and I explained a bit of the philosophy, etc. They were unfortunate in that they didn't get to see Srila Prabhupada. They were just about to leave, because they had a 4-hour drive home, when Prabhupada came back from London, and he came in through the gate just as we were stood there, and they were, saying goodbye. So they kind of got a glimpse, that was all. Anyway, so afterwards, after they'd gone, I went up to see Srila Prabhupada, and he asked me, well, how did it go with your parents? So I said it was very nice, they were very favourable, and I showed them the deities, and we looked around, and I explained a bit of the philosophy. So then Prabhupada said, did they get prasadam? So they said, oh, well, actually I was told there wasn't any. And Prabhupada said, oh. It was almost like, well, what was the use? If they didn't get prasadam, then the whole trip was basically a failure. So, he put a lot of emphasis on prasadam. It was a very practical way, for a person to make advancement in Krishna consciousness.
One big businessman, he came, and he was saying, Swamiji, I have this factory here in Delhi, and I have that factory in Zonpur, and he gave a list of his things, and then he said, I have all this, but I can't sleep. So Prabhupada looks at him and he says, that is why you can't sleep. You give all this to me, then you can peacefully sleep. So then he turns to somebody who was sitting there, and he said, I think it was Gopal Krishnaji. He said, take his address. So this man says, no, Swamiji, I can come anytime. You can come anytime, but we should also be able to come anytime. Take his address. And then he was ready, So yes, and said, no, Swamiji. Prabhupada said, no, take his address. We will relieve you of your problem. You give some of these things to Krishna, then you will be peaceful. And he was like smashed right there. And he did give his address. He had to.
There was a gentleman who came to see him in Geneva at the tail end of a series of other guests. The other guests had been distinguished VIPs from the United Nations and other organizations. And this man was a very simple, humble person who was had come to the temple a couple of times. And so after all of these kind of high-level conversations, this man comes in and Prabhupada looks at him and says, "So, do you have any questions?" And the man says, in French, and we translated, said, "No, I heard that you were coming. And I was just so happy to think that I would get to meet you. And so thank you for receiving me." Prabhupada looked at him for a moment like this. And then he said, "Yogeshwar, bring my harmonium. Hansaduta, you play kartal." And he started singing, chanting Hare Krishna, Hare. And he went on having a small little kirtan there in the room for about 10 minutes, after which the man offered his pranams and thanked Srila Prabhupada and stood up and left. And Prabhupada looked at us with this beautiful smile and said, he was a simple soul, so I knew that he would appreciate. This is the most lovely reciprocation I think I'd ever seen. That he sang for this man because he was a sincere soul.
And my father also asked at that time, he said, "Why are you so anxious to give everyone your food, even if they don't know anything about your philosophy?" And Prabhupada said, "Do you believe in infection?" And my father said, "Yes." And Prabhupada said, "Just like if you eat the food of a sick person, you'll be infected with their disease. And in the same way, if you eat the food that Krishna's eaten, you'll be infected with Krishna's disease." So that was really wonderful. And when we walked out of the room, my father looked at me. He said, "Now I understand why you've joined this movement. This is a genuine holy man." So that was very nice.
During the Nectar of Devotion series in Vrindavan in 1972, when Prabhupada gave the Nectar of Devotion series for 1 month, there was one doubt that was plaguing me because we were putting so much effort into book distribution. But I'd always been taught when I was first joining that the parampara is like a link, a chain. And if you don't have the perfect link, if you're not initiated, you really can't go back to Godhead. And so I had this doubt that we're distributing so many books, but these people will read them, but if they're not initiated, they can't go back to Godhead. So I followed Prabhupada from back Rupa Goswami's Samadhi back into the courtyard, and just before Prabhupada took the steps up onto his courtyard, I presented this question to Prabhupada. I said, "We're distributing so many books, but if people aren't initiated, then they can't go back to Godhead." And Prabhupada turned and looked at me right in the eyes, and he said, "Just by reading my books, they're initiated." And I thought that... another example of compassion, because I thought that was just an incredible example of compassion.
And I remember I asked Nitai, he was a Prabhupada servant at the time, Nitai Prabhu, and then I asked him, did Prabhupada ever say where he's going to be preaching in the next life? And Nitai told me, well, I never heard that question. I could go and ask him right now. So he went right into Prabhupada's room and came out. Prabhupada said, "I'm going to preach in the lower planets in the next life." And I was like, completely fazed. So much compassion. This is what struck me most with Prabhupada was his compassion. It's like bottomless. He was like willing to do anything to please Mahaprabhu and to please his spiritual master. But when he said, "I'm going to preach to the lower planets," I was thinking, how can someone do that? That was really, really, striking.
Brahma Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Hite Namani.
So Prabhupada was completely unfazed in Mayapur. There was no running water, there was no electricity or anything. He had a jute stick toilet, a hole in the ground with some jute sticks around it. But still he followed exactly the same schedule. He couldn't use his dictaphone machine because there's no electricity. So he had his typewriter under his mosquito net on his bed, and he would type out with his 2 fingers. The purpose was unfazed. He got up at the same time, he went out for a morning walk, come back and greet the deities. Even there's no facility, it didn't faze him. He was just his old schedule he kept maintained perfectly.
In St. James's Park, Prabhupada would constantly be pointing out things, different things. I mean, there was one time we were in a park, and there was that story which I remember, but there was some bird droppings, and Prabhupada was asking, he was saying, what is this? And everyone was kind of looking at the bird droppings and thinking, well, they were kind of thinking, well, maybe Prabhupada means some tea leaf formations, like we could esoterically look at it. And Prabhupada said, what does this tell you? And when everyone was kind of bewildered. And then Prabhupada said, this tells you that the same bird is sleeping on the same branch every night. So Prabhupada said, even the bird becomes attached to his apartment. So Prabhupada said, so be careful.
Having gone to Africa after receiving that garland and blessing from Prabhupada and just the personal contact, I was probably as fired up in my own personal preaching as I had ever been, because and everything was falling into place. I was extremely successful in dealing with Indians, and it was just very inspired. So for a great length of time that enthusiasm was there, but gradually it did wane, and I had my difficulties in Africa. And one of them was that I had misappropriated some funds and bought this Rolex watch. And I actually bought it for myself. It was one with a striped gold string down it with a gold around it. Anyhow, so I go to India, and I'm feeling really mortified that I've done this. I'm a brahmachari, and watches were kind of like the thing that you could be attached to or something. It was, even though it's bogus, still everybody had watches. So anyhow, I on my going back to India, I've decided I want to give this to Srila Prabhupada. So when I get to Bombay, I remember Prabhupada was walking with a group of devotees, and I walk up and pay my obeisances, and Prabhupada folds his hands and says hello to me, with pranams, and I'm just overwhelmed that he's even noticing me or remembers me, in any way, that his intimate way of dealing with people again. So Shruti Kirti makes an arrangement for me to come up and see Srila Prabhupada, and it's just myself, Shruti Kirti and Paramahamsa, and sitting at a table just 2 feet away from Srila Prabhupada, and he's sitting across from me. And I give him the Rolex watch, and he goes, oh, Rolex. And he puts it on, and he has another watch on, so he has both watches on at that point. And he's looking, and he looks at me, and he begins lecturing on the purity of Lord Chaitanya's movement, how that we are only different from others because we are following purely these principles that Lord Chaitanya has presented, and that will be the success of our movement, is that if we follow everything purely. And he went on for maybe 20 minutes, a half hour, personally lecturing me on the purity of Lord Chaitanya's movement and how it was important not to spend a farthing of Krishna's money on sense gratification. And I felt from the very beginning he had seen all the way through me and knew that I had got this for myself, and this was my act of patrician redemption, giving it to him. But he was just extremely gracious and warm and strict all at the same time, and Shruti Kirti and Paramahansa were more or less amazed at the talk too. It was just, that he had taken so much time, and so I got to pay my obeisances and leave. And I think that was pretty much the last time I really had personal contact with Srila Prabhupada.
I do remember that the first real intimate exchange I had with Srila Prabhupada, and pretty much the last one was when my mom sent me a sweater. My mother lives in England, and she sent me this really nice wool sweater. And New Vrindavan was a mud hole. It was, just really dirty, and, it was really hard to keep anything clean. So I looked at this beautiful sweater, and it was like kind of saffron in color. And I said, well, I can't wear this, it's going to be trash in no time. I'll give it to Srila Prabhupada, and so somehow I preserved it in the brahmachari ashram in a plastic bag, kept it from getting dirty for probably a couple of months. And I was always thinking, oh, I can't wait to give this to Srila Prabhupada. And so then Prabhupada came to Boston when they first opened the printing press there. And it was a big occasion, and devotees from a lot of different cities went there, and we got in our panel truck and drove up, everybody from New Vrindavan. And so I'm clutching my sweater and, really looking forward to it. And so we get there, and I'm trying to figure out, well, how do I do this? I'm not one of the high muckety mucks, and they're all, going to be with Prabhupada. And so one evening after Artik, everybody was gathered for darshan, and they had created with a backdrop a separate room behind the temple. And that's where Prabhupada gave darshan. And so I just kind of said, okay, it's now or never, and burst in the middle of all this. And everybody kind of looked, who's this? What's he doing here? And I just sort of stammered, for Prabhupada, I have this sweater my mother gave me, and I want you to have it. And Prabhupada said, oh, no, I can't take it. And he says, your mother gave this to you, you take it, I can't take this. And Prabhupada saw the look on my face. I was crushed, I was just devastated. Oh, God. And so he saw that, and then he says, well, I think I said, oh, but Prabhupada, please, I was begging for my life here. And he was very kind, and he said, all right, well, then we'll exchange. And so he started, he had a sweater with these buttons on it, these big oak buttons. It was really a beautiful sweater. And he started unbuttoning it. It was a cardigan, and he took it off, and I was crying, and the devotees in the room were crying. It was, just like an example of loving exchange, and that, I don't know, it just bonded me so closely to Srila Prabhupada, and of course I'll never forget that. And it kept me going for a lot of years.
Well, in 1977, I went to India, and we went down to Mayapur first, and Srila Prabhupada was there, and Mayapur, he became ill. And I saw him brought in with a they were carrying him down the stairs in a chair. He has sunglasses and things. I had given Prabhupada a nice picture of Lord Katamsha at that time, 8x10, and another Maharaji had given Srila Prabhupada a knitted chadar she made. And Srila Prabhupada, he took it, but he immediately gave it to someone else. And the mother went over to Brahmananda Swami and expressed that she was very upset by that because she wanted Prabhupada to have it. And Brahmananda said that you gave it, that's enough. Srila Prabhupada accepted it, now it's his to do what he likes with it. And he often gives things away that he received because he only keeps what he needs.
So in this Hong Kong Hilton, and it was also very interesting that, you know, the rooms were so big and opulent, and in Prabhupada's sleeping room there was a bed, and he asked me to come in and make the bed for him before he was going to take rest. And he was so little compared to this big bed. It seemed so funny in one sense, but he just accepted it. And we held a press conference for Prabhupada. And at that time, Guru Maharajji was quite prominent, and he had quite a following in Hong Kong, as well as obviously in the United States and Europe. So the reporters, and many reporters came. It was quite full, and they asked him questions. The first question they asked him was, "You preach against materialism and just the acquirement of wealth, etc. But here you are living in this very posh penthouse where the Shah-Varan," they didn't say that, and he was. It was the best place in the Hong Kong Hilton, and he, why are you doing this? He was trying to point out the hypocrisy, that there was hypocrisy in Prabhupada was doing. And Prabhupada his consciousness was so clear. There wasn't any fog at all in Prabhupada's consciousness, and he was never intimidated by any kind of question, direct or whatever, trying to catch him. So he said, as far as I'm concerned, first Prabhupada started explaining philosophically that everything belongs to Krishna, and therefore renunciation means to use everything in Krishna's service. So you can imagine the reporter being completely blank when that one was presented to him. And then Prabhupada decided on a different tack to explain it to him. And he said, for me, as far as I'm concerned, I can live under a tree. And practically speaking, Prabhupada did that in 1977. When he was living in Bhubaneswar, he was bathing with out of a well in the mornings in the Kumbh Melas. He didn't have that kind of attachment to opulence. But as far as I'm concerned, Prabhupada said, I could live under a tree. But if I was living under a tree and invited you all to a press conference, would you have come? Complete silence. The point was made, and it was obvious, and it was obvious to them too. So it was such a wonderful answer. Who could have thought of such an answer like that?
Hare Krishna devotees, thank you for listening the wonderful qualities of Srila Prabhupada. So if any devotees want to share any comments or thoughts, please go ahead. Anyone want to unmute and please share? Please go ahead.
Yes, Prabhu, we can do it.
Go ahead, Mataji. Want to share something?
No, Prabhu, the amount of dedication each one of Prabhupada's disciples had, we don't have even a anu of that, Yet, I feel really moved by their how much they care for Prabhupada and how much they took care of him. Amazing, Prabhu.
Yes. They remember all this points, right? How they recorded, kept everything. So that's what treasure we have today because of this Srila Prabhupada disciples.
Exactly.
Wonderful.
In those days, at that time.
Yes. True. Anyone else want to share anything? We have a Goswami Gopinath Prabhu, Prasannath Prabhu,
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Wonderful.
Dandavat Pranam Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandavat Pranams. Thanks to all. Prabhu, you also seem to be as dedicated as the disciples of Srila Prabupada in giving us daily this tonic of Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. Prabhu, Dandavat Pranams.
Yes, Sankarshana Prabhu is master behind this. Okay. If no other comments, we can end it. Anyone want to say anything? Okay, so nothing else. We'll end here. Vancha kalpatarubhyasya kripa sindhudevacha paditana pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namanam ananta koti vaishnav vrinda ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Samaveta bhakta vrinda ki jai. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. So we'll see you tomorrow, same time. Hare Krishna. Pranam. I'll end the call now.